Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
This is GTF, Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia. Excuse the setup and the audio differences that we normally have. I'm trying to fix an echo problem, so I'm using my B computer today. I want to also let you know that our schedule for this week is returned back to its normal schedule of delivering to you about 20 hours of Chicago Bears coverage. It started yesterday early in the morning with Mike North's early Bears special, continued with the Barfly Tailgate show, our fantasy football show, and then Bear football with John Buffone, Tyler Ellis, and Danny Shimon. And I filled in for John yesterday. That's all going to continue this week, along with our additional weekday programs that many of them took a week off. So let's get to the show at hand. His name is Greg Gabriel. He is the guy you are here to see. Greg, how are you, my friend?
I'm wonderful. How about you?
Well, I got to tell you, all of these defeats that the Chicago Bears have been experiencing, I've handled thanks to your coaching. You've talked me off the ledge a number of times. But yesterday's defeat was particularly demoralizing because the loss of key players to what appear to be serious injuries. And in fact, in Matt Eberflus's press conference that just finished a few minutes ago, he announced that Darnell Mooney's season is over with. What's your thought right now on the state of the Chicago Bears?
Well, obviously they're hurting. I mean, that when you go into a game and 3/4 of your secondary's out, that doesn't help you. And you go back to when they made the trades down at the trade deadline. You traded your best linebacker, you traded your best pass rusher. So the defense is totally depleted, and the injuries don't help it. And not only did you have starters go down, you had backups go down during the game. So it'll be really interesting to see, how serious these are. The Bears, except for the case of Darnell, the Bears are always very vague as to the extent of the injuries. Right after Eddie Jackson got hurt, you look on Twitter and everybody's saying, well, it was an Achilles. You know what? I've been looking, if he tore his Achilles, and maybe he did, but somebody would have had it by now. It's 24 hours later, and nobody has anything. Now, I've torn my Achilles, so I know what it's like. And that reaction was not really an Achilles reaction to me, having been through it. And I think we all saw the video of Tariq Cohen tear his Achilles in training just about a month before training camp started.
Right.
That's an Achilles tear reaction. And it's extremely painful for about 10 seconds, and then your foot goes numb. At least that's what happened with me. And mine was just 3 years ago, so it's still close to my mind. But let's just think worst case scenario. Let's say it is. Years ago, you did okay. You got me now? Okay. Yeah. Years ago, that could have been a career-ending injury. That is no longer the case. They have developed the surgical techniques. There is a fairly new technique that all the top ankle and foot doctors are using to repair an Achilles. It's called the PARS technique. And it really quickens up the recovery. And I'll try to explain it. And the only reason I know all this is because I went through it. But when you tear an Achilles tendon, it's a tendon. So, I had a complete rupture, so it tore all the way across. So what happens is the top and the bottom, sometimes the top can shrivel right up into your calf. But the ends look like a mop, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean by the different strands? And with this pars technique, what they do, let's say this is the mop on the top and this is the mop on the bottom, they kind of put it together like this. They used to cut off those strands and then sew the tendon back together, and then you had to re-stretch it out, and that was one of the reasons it took so damn long to recover from it. And sometimes, depending on how much they cut off, you didn't have that flexibility. Well, in this method where you're not cutting off any of the tendon, you're just stitching it back together, stitching through those strands, it actually becomes stronger than it was. With the scar tissue, the rehab isn't nearly as long. So let's, hypothetically, if he did it, there's even a chance he could take part in OTAs. That's how quick the recovery can be. Now, everybody's going to be different. I mean, I was 68 years old when I had mine. So, I wasn't going out and sprinting 6 months later. But there have been guys that have played 5 months after the surgery, 6 months after.
Well, I know you probably were sprinting about a year afterwards, right?
I'm sorry, what?
You probably were sprinting about a year afterwards, right? After the surgery. All right, I want to get into the main topic at hand. We're going to talk about several things, but the main topic
is... what? Although you're not coming through my headset, I'm hearing you. It's coming through my computer, but there's no volume, there's no problem with an echo or delay, right?
No, everybody is in the chat room.
I'm going to do it this way. Is that okay?
That'll work, absolutely.
Okay, so now you're just coming through the computer.
The speakers, correct. All right, so a lot of fans are starting to question Matt Eberflus's defense. I saw it on social media. When I was at the Bears YouTube channel, or a number of people in their chat room complaining about the cover 2, the fact that the scheme is old-fashioned, that there are players, really great players coming out of the draft who don't fit the scheme. So why isn't the scheme fitting the players? Can you address some of those concerns? And I know you have in the past. You said this is not Lovey's cover 2. You said this is a version of it, like a 2.3 or 2.7. So, but I'd love for you to expound on that and tell people what you think about Matt Eberflus's 2022 defense with the Chicago Bears.
Well, okay, let's start at the basics. And the basics are, in order for any defense to be good, you've got to have good players. Okay, and right now the defense doesn't have very many good players, and yesterday they lost a few more. So what are you supposed to do? That's not the scheme, that's the talent. Okay, and now let's fast forward to there. Who said some of these guys in the draft aren't fits? Who's not a fit?
The number one player that comes to mind, according to many people, is Will Anderson, the defensive
Why isn't
end.
he a fit? And I'm just, what I'm doing is I'm posing the question to everybody. Is why isn't he a fit?
Because he appears to be more of a 3-4 linebacker, 240s, and this defense with its 4-3 alignment would prefer to have a larger defensive end.
Okay. Do you know what Alex Brown weighed when we drafted him?
I think you mentioned in an earlier show he's about
48 pounds.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you can take that and shove it. And I'm not saying that to anybody, because and I don't know if Anderson's going to be considered the top edge rusher in this draft. There's still a long way to go. One thing I do know, a year ago, so the 2021 season, he has 18 and a half sacks. Okay, so you think he's going to blow up. Well, guess what? He only has half that this year. So why is that? Our teams, and you got to really get down and watch all the tape. And, and it's not YouTube tape, which is highlights. You got to watch all the tape and you see, okay, are people scheming against him to keep him from making plays. And that very well could be the answer. Or it also could be that the Alabama defense isn't as talented as it was a year ago. And so it's easier to take away him because there's not as many good supporting pieces on the rest of the defensive line. And I'm throwing hypotheticals at you because I haven't studied Alabama to that extent where I could give you, a direct answer. But, and then people say Carter from Georgia. Well, when he's healthy, he's damn good, but he has missed some time. So what are the health issues? And all this stuff will be answered, not necessarily to us, but to the team's liking, is, when they get to the combine and they have their medicals. And then you're going to, they're going to go through these players. If a guy had a knee issue, if he had a knee issue back in high school, I guarantee you, when he gets to the combine, they're going to do an MRI on the knee that he hurt in high school. That's what they do. Okay, when I was working for the Bears at that time, they were doing over 600 MRIs at the combine per year. There's only 200 or 325 or 35 players invited to the combine. That's like 2 MRIs per person. And there's some that obviously don't get any because they haven't been hurt. So the medical they get will be the most comprehensive medical they have in their entire life. And so you want to find out exactly what's there. Now, in saying that, you're only as good as finding out what information you had beforehand. In other words, player X had a knee problem. There are schools that withhold information. And I'll give you a perfect example. The great running back, Adrian Peterson. Oklahoma said he had one knee surgery. Well, he had more than one knee surgery when he was at Oklahoma. But you didn't find that out until after the fact.
Wow.
Okay. Dusty Dvorak, also from Oklahoma, had a foot problem. That foot problem was never checked out at the combine because it was never in his medical records that were shipped to the NFL from Oklahoma at that time. So, the school's got to be above ground in giving you the information. Otherwise, guys, a guy could have a problem and you're not going to know about it. All of a sudden you address the guy and he's getting hurt all the time because you couldn't address it at the combine. It doesn't matter what team it takes. And then, if it's our team, the media is going to jump all over you because you didn't know about it when it really couldn't be helped.
Mm-hmm. So some people are complaining, for instance, Handsome Duke here in our very own chat room. He says that Eberflus is a defensive-minded coach and he should be able to scheme something. He's done nothing week in, and week out.
What's he supposed to do with the players he has? Now, don't forget, a month ago, their best pass rusher guy had 18 and a half sacks last year, and actually, because of him, freed up other people. You take him out. How many sacks have the edge players had since he's been traded besides none?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a problem. And I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, what's the biggest need for this team going into free agency? And I don't care about the draft because free agency comes first. The draft is a reflection of what you do in free agency. They work hand in hand. You got 2 areas of player acquisition, and you worry about the draft after you take part in free agency. Now, in saying all that, part of it is what's your draft position? Now, they're going to know their draft position before free agency starts. They're not going to know if they can trade down, trade up, or whatever. Right now, they're sitting at number 2. Does that mean they're going to be sitting at number 2 in 6 more weeks? Who the hell knows? And we'll find out in 6 weeks. But if you're sitting at 2 or 3, you got a pretty damn good idea who you can get. I mean, it's going to be A or B. Let's say, okay, let's just, for lack of an argument, say it's Anderson or Carter. And let's say, okay, so the pass rusher, in my opinion, is the better player. And I'm just throwing darts at the wall here. because that, when you look at value of the position, the pass rusher is better. So that means I better go out and get me a defensive tackle in free agency. Mm-hmm. And if I got to spend a little extra, I'm going to spend a little extra. Okay. And then you also look at free agency and say, well, I don't think I can get a real good pass rusher in free agency this year. Now, people have mentioned, the guy at New Orleans. He's one of the best pass rushers in this year's upcoming free agent class. He's got a half a sack this year. He's had 1 year of production. Last year he had 9 sacks. Before that, he's been a 4 or 5 sack guy. So you're going to pay him a lot of money?
Is that Marcus Davenport? Davenport?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Unless he got something yesterday and I didn't look. He had 1/2 sack this year. So why are you going after him?
Yeah, I hear you.
And you see all these people, mock drafts. Mock drafts are clickbait right now. They're absolutely meaningless. Number one, you don't know who's in the draft. Juniors have to declare. And until they declare, again, you're throwing a dart at the wall because you don't know. And the teams don't know. The agents know more than the teams do because, these kids are talking to the agents or their families are talking to the agents and they're being heavily recruited. But now that unless your team's in a bowl game, the college season's over. And, so you'll be teams that, if a kid's going to opt out of a bowl game, he may sign with an agent or whatever. So we're going to start to see names trickle in. Okay. Who's going to enter the draft? And the last 5-6 years, there's been over 100 underclassmen enter the draft. There's 3 rounds of players there. Now, some of those 100 don't even get drafted, or 120, I think, they don't even get drafted. But somebody says here, we need mock drafts for hope. No, you don't. Mock drafts do nothing but fool you because they're not realistic. They are not realistic. They don't. That's. And I'm not trying to bang draft analysts here. You got very little information. Use Will Anderson as a perfect example. Okay, going into the season, he was the guy, 18.5 sacks this year. But you got to answer the big question. Why did his production drop in half?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you can answer that question and it satisfies you, then you could be good to go. Mm-hmm. And I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm not trying to criticize the player at all. I'm just trying to, I've been through the process. I know what happens in these discussions. Mm-hmm. And you're going to get, here's going forward. Most teams will bring in their scouts next week. Maybe some will start bringing them in this week. They're going to spend a week. They're going to put it, I won't even call it a preliminary board because it's really an elimination process. I mean, yeah, you put their names up on a board and it's based on pretty much the highest grade that you have in your system. It's not a culmination of all the grades. Okay, so you could have a shitty player that has an 8.0 grade because some scout, misevaluated the guy. And so he's got your best grade in the system, but that doesn't mean come April, he's going to be there. He could be he could be number 220 for all we know. It's the process now when you get into December is more of an elimination process where you got names. You got 13, 14, 1,500 names. Well, your draft board's going to have 100 names on it when you get there in April. So you got to start paring the fat, and could be character risks, could be guys that are going to be injury problems, could be guys that just aren't scheme fits. In this scheme, I'd be hard pressed to see that if there was a big 340, 350 pound defensive lineman, they would be even interested in, because that's not the type of player that plays in this scheme. It's the type of player you play in a 2-gap, 3-man scheme, 3-man front. So you do those types of things. And now, like at the off the ball linebacker position, you're looking for more speed. That's like, speed, coverability, guys who can play 3 downs. And so guys that are coming in at 4.8 and they don't play fast and they can't cover, you eliminate those guys because they're not going to be fits within your scheme.
The other thing that I think fans and even some analysts fail to account is this scheme change that the Bears underwent. Going from a 3-4 to a 4-3, it's impossible in one season to get all of the personnel you need when you're making such a dramatic change in personnel. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I mean, I know you have in the past, and we've gone through this before, but I'd like, the best way to communicate something is to say it over and over and over again, because eventually somebody will start to understand. And so, this 4-3 is different than what the Bears have been running the last several years.
Well, it's even though the Bears ran a 3-4 last year, that scheme is more similar. Let's go back to when Lovey came in 2004. Okay, when we came in 2001, Greg Blosch was the defensive coordinator. And in his scheme, and there's nothing wrong with his scheme, it's what he wanted to run. And he used a lot of 3-4 principles in a 4-3 front. We had probably the biggest, except for Alex Brown in 2003, we had probably the biggest defensive line in football. When you look at the size, Philip Daniels was about 315, 320, playing the left end spot. Then you had Keith Traylor and Ted Washington playing the inside tackles. They were about 375 apiece. And the program weight might have been 350, but that was lying. So, huge guys that couldn't move that well, couldn't really rush the passer. Greg Blosch was not a big believer in sacks. He was a believer in pressures. But the only guy who could come off the edge, we had that linebacker when I first came here, and then we lost him in free agency to New England. I can't remember his name, from Purdue.
Roosevelt Colvin?
Yeah, Rosie Colvin. So we had Rosie. We lost Rosie in free agency to the Pats. I believe it was free agency. And then we drafted Alex. And Alex came in the 4th round. You don't have to get a top pass rusher in the 1st round. Tell you what, I saw a thing today. Somebody said the best defensive and football player in the NFL this year is Max Crosby from the Raiders. I might be wrong in saying this, but I think he was a 3rd round pick.
That's correct. Yeah.
So it's just, a culmination of things. You got to get lucky. There's no question you got to get lucky. But, people want to worry about the draft now. And half the fan base is praying that they lose. Just lose nicely. Don't get blown out, So we can have the high pick. But I guarantee you, the coaches and the players aren't thinking that way. That is not part of their DNA, not part of their thought process.
By the way, I just looked it up. Max Crosby was selected in the 4th round, the 106th overall pick.
Okay, well, a lot of people say he's the best defensive player in the National Football League this year.
Very, very interesting. All right, I'd like to now talk about individual players, because I love Kindle Vildor. I met him at the Senior Bowl. I've been pulling for this kid since day one, but his uneven play. I mean, let's face it, this is his 3rd year or 4th year in the league, and it just seems like he hasn't achieved that type of consistency that you should rely on for a starting cornerback and even for a backup cornerback. Am I giving up too quickly on Kindle Vildor?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you expect him to pitch a shutout every game?
No, not at that position. That's for sure.
Okay, well, you're going to give up pass receptions. And I think that's what people think. They're supposed to, if they give up a pass reception, they suck. It's overboard. You got to look at the overall play. There's good and there's bad. You're going to, especially at that position more than any other position, you're going to get beat. The best get beat. I see Jalen Ramsey this year, is supposed to be the best corner in football, get beat a ton of times this year and get beat bad. Does that mean he sucks?
It's a good point. And as Tony says, it's hard to grade defensive backs because your defensive line is just not getting pressure. So,
hey, you can't cover those guys for 5 seconds. That's impossible. They got the receiver has the advantage on that one. And I'm not sticking up for any of the players. He got beat bad on one play. But Jalen got beat too. What?
But he has lost his job. I mean, last year he was in the starting, and Sean Desai benched him, and he has struggled a bit to get onto the field. And it seems like when he's
I think overall play this year has been a plus. When he's been out, they've missed him. They, it tells you something that they insert as soon as he's back healthy again, they put him right back in the starting unit. That hasn't been the case with everybody, with this particular coaching staff, with everybody that gets hurt.
Yeah.
And so, I think that you got to take that into consideration. Would you like a little better? Yeah, maybe. With the pass rush out? Definitely. But, I think it's a combination of everything. There's a lot of things to fix, and you're not going to fix it all in this one-off season. Okay. To me, priority number one is defensive line. And people, got to have the offensive line. I think the offensive line needs one player, and then they need to be healthy.
Right. One player in depth, right?
A right tackle.
Right.
Okay, that's assuming. Okay, now could you go and say Cody Whitehair's done? Given is he going to be worth to the team? No, I've always said this. If you're making, what's he making next year? $8 million or something like that. Is he giving you $8 million in production for the $8 million you're giving him in pay? And if the answer is no, then okay, well, maybe we got to replace him. It's time to ship him out. So, and again, hypothetical. So, but who are you going to replace him with? Is that guy going to be better? And what's it going to cost you to replace him? Or is that guy already here? Is it J. Tyree Carter? Is it Leatherwood? Or is Leatherwood going to be the right tackle? I just know Leatherwood's really struggled on the right side with the Raiders. So I'd be a little timid myself trying to play him on the right side. As bad as he played for the Raiders as a right tackle, and then when you go back and you look at him in college, and he was a hell of a left tackle. So that tells you to play on the left side. But when you flip everything around and you got your right hand in the dirt instead of your left hand, and you got your right foot back instead of your left foot, he gets all screwed up.
Do you anticipate Alex Leatherwood? I know you have talked a little bit about it. Might be best for Leatherwood if he was mothballed this season and allowed to develop over the offseason and so forth. But given the injuries, we don't know the status of Riley Reif for a Sunday's game. We don't know the status of Larry Borum, who left the game with an ankle injury, according to Matt Eberflus today. What do you think about potentially putting Leatherwood in at right tackle and finally getting a look at this young man?
Yeah, me throwing a dart here, I think they've written off Borum. Borum we had high hopes for him because he had flashes of good play. But, you're looking for a young player to keep climbing. And, eventually he's going to level out, and then you hope that he starts climbing again. He keeps getting better. He's leveled out and hasn't gotten any better. And, people want to blame that one sack on him. That's the second time I've seen this happen, where an outside guy has come free and killed the quarterback.
Yeah.
And the right tackle has been blocking down. Guess what, guys? That wasn't his fault. The fault it was the quarterback's.
Why is that, Greg?
Well, he's got to change the protection.
Okay.
You look at, and I went back to look at the play, and I said, "Damn, he came free. What was there a back there?" So I went back and played it back, like, right in real time, and they had an empty backfield.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no back to pick this guy up. He had a free rein to the quarterback. So that's up for the quarterback. He sees that guy's out in a 9 technique, even 9.5 technique. He was way out wide. Nobody was set to block him. You got to change your protection at the line of scrimmage.
Question about yesterday's game. The offense in that first half, or particularly the first quarter, came out strong. They were completing passes. There was tempo to the passing game. It's one thing that I was most interested about yesterday's game, is to see how a veteran quarterback could operate Luke Getsy's offense. And then all of a sudden, just things flew off the rails to start the third quarter. They went 3 and out. The Jets went 3 and out, but then the Bears again went 3 and out. And then finally the Jets got their offense going and the game got out of control. But do you think that we learned anything about Luke Getsy's offense based on what you saw with a veteran quarterback running it?
No, because what happened is I don't think I'll tell you a little story. There's a good friend of mine on the Jets staff. So Wednesday, I get a text. Wednesday night, late. Get a text. You think Fields is going to play?
No.
I don't know. Why should I give out information? So then the next day, do you think Fields is going to play? No, he's listed as questionable and limited, so some of the games that Eberflus was playing, with his not disclosing all information, that does screw up the other team because they don't know exactly what to prepare for. They're probably thinking all week Fields is going to play. But just in case, we got to prepare for the other guy. But you don't have any tape of the other guy playing during the season, really, this year. So, and on top of that, he gets hurt in the warm-up with an oblique. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but I know one thing. He's not the most mobile guy in the world. And it took the Jets 2 series to figure that out. And so then they started changing what they were doing as far as we're going to attack some more because he can't move. And he doesn't have a big arm to begin with, but if that oblique was hurting him as far as his release and getting the ball out and having some velocity on the ball, I don't even know what side he hurt. Nobody disclosed that. Was it the right side or the left side? But if that was the case, then he became a sitting duck. I tweeted out, you may have seen it. I said, you got to have a backup that's good enough to win when your starter goes down. And he isn't good enough. And so, and so it's always, he was playing hurt. I don't care. He can't move around, number one. And so you've got a entirely different quarterback than what your starter is. And that's usually the case in the National Football League. But he's got no juice on that ball. And there's plays that were there that, because he can't drive the ball as good as you'd like, ended up getting broken up.
Yeah, frankly, I was a little surprised by that tweet, Greg, because given the fact that he had supposedly this injury, and given the fact that it was very, very wet conditions, I mean that was a constant downpour for all four quarters and for pregame as well. It was for me hard to evaluate, just how hard he can plant and throw that ball. So
No, and I'll give you that. So I think it's like, okay, let's give him one more week. But if that's all he's going to give you, let's say it doesn't change. If that's all he's going to give you, then that isn't good enough. Okay, so it's now one of the needs then going into the off season could be we got to have a better backup. And in that tweet I was looking through some of the responses, and there was the one, and I never replies to my tweets, or very rarely, but this one I did. Guy said, "Bring back Trubisky." And you know what? I go, you know what? It's probably not going to happen, but that would be a good person. But I think upstairs it just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
With him being that he was a first round pick. But when you look at his arm talent, his maneuverability, can he win a game if your starter goes down? We know that. So would he be an ideal backup within this scheme?
Yeah, it would drive my buddy Mike North crazy to see him as a second stringer, but I like the idea as well.
Mike might have the big one and end up 6 feet under if that happened.
You ain't kidding. All right, let's get to some of the questions because they're piling up here. Even before the show began, Brent Murphy asked us, what do you guys think is going on with Trevis Gibson? I personally like his talent and felt he could be a lot better than he is now. Always look forward to the show after a Bears game. What do you think about Mr. Gibson and his play so far?
He's not showing up.
Yeah.
Part of the reason is because you don't have a guy that you got to contain on the other side. Okay, now, looking at this realistically, at one, you really had Khalil Mack and Quinn. Okay, and Mack goes down and Quinn comes, and rather Khalil Mack goes down and Gibson comes in, but Quinn's having a career year. Well, who are they concentrating on?
Mm-hmm.
And so now, there is no outstanding pass rusher. It's a guy that's, I agree. He's got some talent, but you can say it's like the Larry Borum thing. He's hit that plateau. He better start climbing the wall some more, or he's not going to be around, because there hasn't been a sack by an outside guy in 4 weeks now. And that ain't good enough.
That's awful. That's awful.
And I'll give a pass to Robinson. He's a rookie who's only been playing defense. It's only the third year he's played defense.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still learning how to play the position. And I think he's got to get bigger and stronger, just looking at
And
him.
Brad Biggs' 10 thoughts about the game, his always stellar Monday column or day after the game column. He said that he talked with the defensive line coach of the Chicago Bears, and one of the reasons or excuses that he offered for the lack of sacks is that teams are running the ball so successfully against the Chicago Bears that the Bears defensive linemen are not getting as many opportunities for one-on-one pass rushes, and that therefore their opportunities to create pressure, create sacks, create quarterback hurries are limited because of the Bears first have to stop the run, and teams are just going to continue to take advantage of that. Do you think that's BS, or do you think there's some truth to that?
Well, there's some truth to it, but still, when you got 3rd and 8, where's the excuse for that?
Yeah.
Okay, now when you're staying ahead of the chains, that is advantage offense. as far as your play calling, and you can run or pass whatever the hell you want, and that does take away from the ability of the defensive line to get off the ball quickly. But still, there's been plenty of times when there's been third and long, or you're second and 12 or something like that, and a pass is coming, and they're not getting pressure. They got some pressure last week and the week before because they were blitzing more than they ever do.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't blitz yesterday because so many damn guys were hurt in the secondary that they had to drop their underneath people. The linebackers had to play in the coverage. So you couldn't lie. You couldn't leave that secondary totally barren. And we saw the results. I mean, hell, this white guy had the game of his life, but he was playing against a bunch of backups for most of the game.
Yeah, it was like a week 1 or week 2 preseason game for Mike White. It really was. Yeah. Cole Kmet said something that I thought was very interesting, something that I had not thought much of in all my years of following football, but I think he was totally accurate. He talked about the amount of injuries that have hit this team in such a short amount of time and how that works on the psyche of players. And I'm paraphrasing here, how that works on the psyche of players who are still in the game, because now you don't know if you can trust that guy who just came in at right tackle or that guy that came in at some other position, and you might get slammed because that guy, that new replacement, doesn't have the knowledge, the experience, the trust of teammates to follow their position. And that's what leads to even more injuries. I see you smiling a little bit. What do you think about that?
Because just listening the way you described that, and I heard part of his presser, but not all of it. It's like, then why is that guy on the team? Not Cole Kmet.
No, I understand.
the guy you can't trust.
Right.
If he is shown in practice that he can't be trusted, so that when he gets put in the game, you can't trust him, he shouldn't be on the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I do have this feeling, Greg, and I think you'll agree with me, is that there was a time during the player acquisition period where Ryan Poles and his team of personnel people, they were just saying, man, there aren't enough guys out there that we need. So let's stack up all of our resources, or as many resources as we can, for 2023, when there will be more players available that fit our scheme and what we want to do.
I don't know if there's going to be more players available to fit your scheme, but I think what he was doing more, just for sake of a little bit of an argument here, is I want to get rid of the dead weight that I know is not going to be here in 2 years. We could have played with Khalil Mack this year. We could have played with Quinn this year. We could have played with Roquan this year. But we knew that, like Roque or Khalil started off like gangbusters, like he usually does. But now he's slowing up. And I haven't looked at what his numbers are the last couple of weeks. But it's not like it was in the beginning of the year, because that's what happens to him. He's been beat up so much that, okay, I'm rested. I'm new to the season. He feels great. But then he gets nagged up and he can't play like he was playing early in the year. So when they study the tape, you see that. That's why Belichick has always been noted for getting rid of a guy assumed to be 1 year early, when he already knows they're going downhill.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets rid of them when he can get maximum value.
Mm-hmm.
When I know they're going, but you don't.
That's good. But I gotta throw this one in here, because prior to the season, you and I, with my limited knowledge of the game compared to you, were thinking that Mario Edwards would have been a really good player on this defense, and here they are paying some of his salary, but he did not make the team. Do you still think that Mario Edwards could have helped this team?
When I look at the way Mario Edwards played the last 2 years for the Bears, I thought yes. But something tells me and nobody's ever confirmed this, so I'm throwing shit at the wall. He wasn't buying in. And if he wasn't buying in, they didn't even play him in the preseason. So that tells me that you know what, he wasn't buying in. We don't want him as part of this team.
Yep, good point. All right, we got some more questions here to get to. These injuries, ask PZ, how far back does this set back the rebuild? How far back does it impact the rebuild? I would imagine, that not having your starters there could be looked at as an opportunity for other players, for instance, Justin Fields, to develop a relationship with Chase Claypool if Darnell Mooney is not playing, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think about PZ's question?
I don't think in fairness, I don't think it sets back anything. It gives you actually the opportunity to you turn it around. It gives you the opportunity to look at more players that ordinarily you wouldn't have had a chance to look at. And then you make a determination. You know what? He's not good enough. Or he's showing me a little bit more than I thought that he had, and so, perfect example is Jack Sanborn, undrafted free agent. And, he jumped out in the preseason. And the one thing about Sanborn, and I saw a tweet yesterday, somebody, the guy who has that RAS thing, and he thinks
Ken Gladdy.
Yeah, he thinks that's the be all end all. All it is one little tiny tool. Doesn't tell you if you're a good football player.
That's correct.
Okay, so who's one of the best linebackers to ever play the game for the Chicago Bears?
One of the best linemen, offensive linemen? Linebackers. Well, Dick Butkus.
No, okay, but no, that's before combine days. But
But I was just gonna say that Dick Butkus probably would have had a terrible RAS score.
Oh, guaranteed. He'd probably be an undrafted free agent today because he'd probably run a 5 flat or a 5.1. But it was a different game then, and he could do what he could do. But Lance Briggs' RAS was worse than Sanborn's. Sanborn in every single category, and there's things that Lance didn't do that Sanborn did do. Sanborn was better. He's faster. He can jump higher. He can jump farther. His 3-cone he had a sub 7-second 3-cone. That's excellent for a linebacker. He's got like a 6.96 3-cone. And his 20 shuttle was pretty good too. He's got like 34-inch arms, and he's 6'1 3/4. So 34-inch arms are really, really long for a guy who's under 6'2". So, but what he's got most important, throw out all those numbers. His instincts are rare, and that's what Lance had. Rare instincts. And go back to when I told you, Lovey said, saw that 4.78. He goes, he can't play Will. He's too slow. So Lovey, his instincts are rare. He plays 4.55. Well, that's Sanborn. And they isolated him on that one play yesterday where he, read the play instantaneously. And what he had, I say, when I'm talking about linebackers, I go, they're either reactors or anticipators. Okay, when you're a reactor, you're seeing it and then you react. Anticipator is ahead, one step ahead. Okay, he's an anticipator. So he saw that play, and then he not only gets over in the right position, but there's a guy out there to block him, and he undercuts that guy, with a little move, and then makes the play for a loss. That's all instinct.
Yeah.
You can't teach it.
Well, his linebackers coach told Brad Biggs that it's not just instincts, it's also immense preparation that Sanborn, who has played linebacker since he was a kid, really loves the game, is a student of the game. And so that when you mix in that instinct and anticipation along with great study of what the other team is running, you get a Jack Sanborn, a guy who is not athletically gifted, but is certainly making a name for himself in his rookie season.
Well,
All right.
let's put it this way.
Sure.
He's not exactly what you want speed-wise in today's game. He ran a 4.72. But like Lance, who ran a 4.78, he plays a lot faster because of the instincts.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Earlier, when we were talking, when you brought up free agency and that's the next big step for player acquisition, Pepe asked about Darren Payne from the Commander, somebody that you've talked about a number of times on this show before. And so I want to expand your endorsement of Darren, or sort of expand on it. But what I want to basically ask you is, you're either got to go after Payne or Jalen Carter, because these three tech defensive linemen are hard to find. They don't grow on trees.
Well, I think there's a few guys in free agency that you go after.
Okay.
First of all, I think Jones can play either position. Okay, and he's the best interior guy they got right now. Okay, there's Hargrove from the Eagles. Hargrove theoretically might be the best guy, the most explosive guy, and he fits what you're looking for. The negative on Hargrove is he's going to be 30 next year. So how much money do you want to give a guy who's going to be 30? And, how long is he going to be able to play at that high level? So that's a question. If they want to do it, fine. Because, based on watching him play for the Eagles last year and this year, the guy's a monster. He's a hell of a football player. Okay. Payne's 26 years old. I'd rather have Payne.
Yeah, me too. I'd rather be 26 years old.
And I think Payne can play either position. Now, Washington's on record saying, we're going to do everything we can to bring him back, but they're going to have problems to be able to bring him back, to be able to pay what he wants. And they've also, they got the number one pick in the draft from a couple of years ago who's been dinged up, but he's, when he's playing, he's great. And sometimes you just, it's circumstance and you got to wait on those guys, but that guy's got to get paid too. So somebody is going to be let out the door. And who's it going to be? Because he's going to be due about $18, $19 million a year. And then there's a guy, what the hell's his name, Bates with Denver. Who's a pretty good player too. Now they're playing a three-man front, but he can play the three. And he's a pretty darn good player. And he's a free agent. So you got players there that, it's like, okay, who can I get? And you're going to start, everybody cheats. You're going to start talking to the agents early. You're going to be talking at the combine. And even before that, hell, I wouldn't be surprised if they're talking to people now. And off the record, so to speak. And go from there. You're gonna know, because that's going to determine. Go back to what I said at the beginning of the show. Before free agency starts, you're going to know what draft position you have. So you might, if you're picking in the top 3, top 4, you're going to have an idea. You can get player A or player B, and you're not going to. Worst case scenario, you're going to get player B. And so based on that, I'm going to do this in free agency. Well, if they're picking 8th, then they don't know what to get at that point.
Right.
So that becomes a different story. So now the draft becomes a reaction to what you do in free agency.
All right. Toa has a question here. In the unlikely event that Orlando Brown becomes a free agent, do you sign the left tackle to shore up that side and then move Braxton Jones, who I know you're very, very high on? But do you then bring in Orlando Brown and then move Braxton Jones, perhaps the other tackle position or left guard? And then you can probably look for that 3-tech or pass rusher in the draft. Thoughts on that?
Well, Orlando Brown's going to cost you at least $20 million because he ain't signed anything yet. And he is like Roquan. I'm my own agent. So you got a problem with that one. Kansas City, I would bet, would tag him again. You get a 20% raise. It'd be cheaper for him to do a deal. I'm sure they want to get a deal done with him. I'd be kind of surprised if he ends up in free agency. The only thing is, you're playing an outside zone scheme, which, and you've seen some of the clips where Braxton Jones gets out in front of people and is hitting people 5, 6, 7 yards downfield and adjusting on the move and still crushing them. Orlando Brown can't do that in 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay, go back to Orlando Brown's combine where he was the laughingstock of the combine.
I remember, yes.
Okay, and it's like, my God, he's going to try. He might be a free agent after this. And that's where you got to throw out the shorts Olympics and go back to the tape, because his tape was pretty good. And I remember, I met with him that off season, before the draft. I was doing a thing for this group out of Chicago that was they did this draft thing down in Dallas, and it was on ESPN. Dusty Dvorak was one of the announcers. Bill Polian was involved, and I did like a behind the scenes thing that they use where I was interviewing the players in a combine type interview.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was one of the guys that I interviewed. He was really a good guy. I mean, had his head screwed on straight. Now, when you looked at him, he said he wasn't a warrior in the weight room.
That's for sure.
Because, the way he looked at his body, but he's very, very strong. Put it this way, he's not built like his dad was. His dad was huge, and this guy's huge. But now he's matured, but a good kid. And would you want to have him? Yeah, you're not going to turn it down, but you want to pay $20 million when you got a rookie 5th round pick. You're paying minimum salary to him for another 3 years, who's going to do nothing but get better.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you there. All right, let's get to another question here from Mike. Assume that the Bears end up with the 2nd overall pick. You got to trade down if you get a good offer, right? We have too many holes on the roster to just take one player. This is the $64,000 question that is being asked by so many people. You've got this great draft slot. If you do end up at number 2, a lot of teams are searching for a quarterback. They're going to come calling you. What do? Do you say,
okay, here's where your one assumption's bad. You're assuming they want to trade up to get a quarterback. Okay, so because that's usually what happens. Okay, and I've done all the top quarterbacks, and I did them for a team, and I just finished literally this morning. And my number one guy isn't what the draft media's number one guy is, based on pure talent. Not what he's done in college, but based on, and I'll tell you who it is. It's, my number one is Will Levis from University of Kentucky. My number one quarterback. My number 2 is Young from Alabama, and then the Ohio State kid would be 3rd out of that group of 3.
Okay.
The kid at Ohio State got great numbers. Gets in a big game and he pisses down his leg.
Yeah.
Okay, he's done it 2 years in a row, and he even said it himself. What's your legacy going to be? I couldn't win a Big Ten championship, and I couldn't beat that team up north.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows it. And the kid from Alabama, really talented guy, and he's been brought up in a pro system. He's accurate. The only thing that you have against him, and he's got arm talent, is he's going to be 6 feet tall. Probably 6 feet tall, 190, 195 pounds. Maybe you're lucky he's going to be 200. Levis has got better arm talent. I put this in my report to the team I did this for. I said, put Levis at Alabama and or Ohio State, and he's hands down the number 1 pick in the draft.
Wow.
There's no questions about it, because his supporting cast at Kentucky sucks. He doesn't have anywhere near the talent that those guys have had. It. You look at the receivers that Young has had the last few years at Alabama, and you look at the receivers that Stroud's had at Ohio State. He's got all first-round picks.
Right.
Okay, and pretty damn good college offensive line.
Yeah.
So it now you got a guy that's and here's the guy I compare him with a little bit is Josh Allen. He's not as tall as Josh. Josh is 6'5", where Levis is going to be 6'3". Levis is built like Josh Allen, but probably even stronger. I mean, I've seen some close-ups of him. The boy works in the weight room now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of quarterbacks that never saw the inside of a weight room while they're in college because they're not pushed into it. This kid has. It's obvious. He's got a quick release. He's got a cannon arm. You go back to Josh Allen. Josh Allen never completed more than 58% of his passes in college. And that was one of the questions, about him is he's not accurate. Mm-hmm. But what Josh Allen had that it's tough to evaluate unless you really get into the guy's head and really get to know the guy is what's his football character. Mm-hmm. And I put that on in my report too. I said, you know what? I don't know anything about this guy though. I love his talent. And I think if you surround him with better people than he has in Kentucky, he'd be hands down the number 1 quarterback. But I don't know what's up here. I don't know what his football character is. Obviously, he works in the weight room. But still, when you look at how quick his release is, his accuracy, long and short, the raw talents, again, it's like Josh Allen. The raw talent's there. So when you look at the ceiling, okay, how good can Young get? How good? Stroud, I think people question his overall arm talent. He's got a good arm. He doesn't have a great arm. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like Mac Jones from the Patriots, who was at Alabama before. It's above average to good, but he's no cannon. I have not seen a ball. Now, I'm sure he's thrown it, but I have not seen it when I was looking at tape where he threw the ball more than 45 yards in the air.
Well, that's a problem.
Well, it's just that I haven't seen it. I'm sure he's done it. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah. Okay, I get you. Hallballs asked the question, what questions do you, Greg, ask when you're interviewing a prospect at the combine?
Well, we had a set interviewing form that you'd always go off topic with, but it was the basis to start. Whether it was at the combine or an all-star game, and we used to tape all our interviews. And at the combine, you got 15 minutes. At the all-star games, you had a lot more. So some of these things went on for an hour at all-star games. Mm-hmm. But you want to, well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. Your area scouts have done a lot of research. So especially if the guy is a good player, but he has some issues, whether it's law enforcement issue or a drinking issue or something, there's some snakes in his head from somewhere in the past. When you go into an interview, you want to already know what the answers are through your research.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't know you know what the answers are. And then you start asking them to talk about it. And when they bullshit you, bye.
That's right.
And there's a receiver we interviewed and at the combine one year, and he got thrown off. Real talented guy, and he played in the league, but never had a great career in the league. He got thrown off his college team his final year, and he really came out as an underclassman. And so he asked him about it. Now, Jerry was pretty close to the people at the, who were there, so he had what the school thought. But when we got the kid in the room, it was everybody else's fault but his. And this goes back even because we did some, and I don't want to say the guy's name, but I'm going to say this. He grew up in Buffalo, so it's my town. So I have my connections in my town. And so there was issues when he was in high school. His talent was way up here. But when he would point the finger at everybody else and not point the finger at himself, and accept responsibility for his actions, like, piss on him. We don't want him. You don't want that guy in your locker room.
That's why I'm shocked that the New York Jets drafted Zach Wilson, because those were the stories about him. And he's proven it now as a pro that he's not the kind of guy who will accept responsibility. His career in New York is in jeopardy.
For a good Mormon kid, he got a lot of issues.
That's right. I don't think he went to church or whatever other religious environment.
Have you ever been to BYU?
Never been to BYU. I've spent some time in Salt Lake City, but never been to the campus.
Well, not a big difference. BYU is about an hour down the road. It's like a whole different world there. I don't drink coffee. So I have like a Pepsi or a Coke when I'm watching tape and stuff. Do you know you're not allowed there's no coffee allowed on that campus? There's no Pepsi, no Coke, and vending machines, no caffeine.
Wow, I didn't know that. No.
Yeah.
All I know is that at around 9 o'clock at night, I'm looking for a liquor store. I couldn't find one in the entire state.
The first time I'm there, and so this was in the 80s, and there's a Marriott directly across the street from the big cathedral, tabernacle, whatever they call it, Mormon tabernacle. So, I was staying at that Marriott, and there was a bar there. So I'm figuring, okay, I don't know anything about the rules, and this is before they had the Winter Olympics there, so the rules were totally different. Now things have opened up. So I go in and I just said, can I have a screwdriver? Bartender says, well, I'll give you the orange juice. You got to go get the vodka.
Oh, my gosh.
He goes, yeah. I go, well, where the hell do I get the vodka? He goes, walk through that door. There's a little liquor store. So, yeah, you got to go in. They had the little airline bottles.
Yeah.
And so, but the bar would still charge you about $6 for the orange juice. So they're still making the money. And they probably own and they did. This is a Marriott. They own the liquor store. But it was. So now on Saturday, I'm there for a game. And on Saturday night, it was like a club type atmosphere. The place is mobbed. Everybody's walking in with a brown bag. But Mormons aren't supposed to drink.
Yeah, I've heard those kinds of stories in the past. All right, I got a couple of more questions before we pull the plug on this one. And I apologize to those whose questions I didn't get time here to tackle. But Jay Goodman and a number of other people in the chat room have asked about Alan Williams. So we'll come kind of full circle because we started talking about the defense. But, people want to know your take on defensive coordinator Alan Williams. They want to know, do you think that he has disappointed this season? Do you think that if he gets better personnel next season, that he can be trusted to utilize that personnel to their utmost? And I'll add one there. Do you think that if he gets players, if he's forced to work with players who are not scheme compliant with his scheme, do you think that he's got the versatility and the coaching, whatever, to utilize those players effectively?
Well, first of all, you're not going to bring in a guy that's not a fit, and let's talk about fit first. It's not, you just don't want a 340-pound interior defensive lineman.
Right.
Okay, they can't move. You've got to have some quickness in this defense. Like Pennell is not really a fit.
Mm-hmm.
Plays okay within the scheme, but he's not what you want. You're living with him right now. Okay. So, but the guy does play hard. You can't take that away from the guy. Mm-hmm. So you try to find players that, be it free agency or the draft, that are going to have the traits. Every position, like when I was here, we had a profile written up for every position. This is what we want at the left end. This is what we want at the right end. This is what we want at the Mike linebacker. This is what we want. We had, height, weight, speed, we have parameters. Now, would you deviate? Of course you deviate. But you want to get as close to the profile. The profile is the ideal guy. Mm-hmm. Well, how often do you get the ideal guy besides almost never?
Right.
But you try to find guys that are close to ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just want to...
Getting back to Alan Williams, I think it's really unfair this year to even think about saying he's good enough, not good enough, totally incomplete grade because of the cards he's been dealt. Two of his best players were traded away by plan, and he's playing. He doesn't have a 52 card deck. He's got about 43,
if that. Yeah.
And he's missing. He's missing a lot of kings, queens, and aces.
Mm-hmm.
So get him some players, and now see what he can do.
Yeah, and that's, to me, the argument that I have against trading back. If you have the second overall, third overall, you're guaranteed a blue chip player. I mean, the odds of hitting on a player who is going to be a difference maker, a blue chip player, are much, much higher if you're drafting that high up in the draft.
I don't know if I agree with you. Only because how many times do we see busts? Okay, perfect example. We're just talking about the kid from the Jets, who likes to screw his mother's best friend. So only because I read it.
Allegedly, okay.
Mitchell Trubisky.
True, but
Sam Darnold.
You've mentioned three quarterbacks, and quarterbacks are overdrafted all the time. But when you get to players like defensive linemen and other position players, I'd have to look at the analytics here. I would think that the higher possibilities of hitting on those picks, if it's a top 5 pick, are much higher than drafting one in the second round, third round, what have you.
Here's the answer to your question now, is you not necessarily mock draft, but you put together packages as part of your process leading up to the draft.
Okay.
If I trade down, first of all, you're going to look at your board, and you got grades on the board. Okay, let's say, I don't want to. If I trade back, I don't want to be below this level grade because that's where I know, there's like a drop off there that I don't want to be bothered with. I know I'm getting a level less player. So I got to get one of these players. Now, how many players are in that grouping? We don't have the answer to that yet. All the you see all this stuff now, but it's to me it's foolish. I do laugh at it. I'm not making fun of the guys that do it, but it's all clickbait because you don't have all the information. You don't have verified measurables. You don't have medical information, and in a lot of cases, you don't have all the character yet. And a team isn't going to make a decision until they have all the information. But yet, all the draft analysts are making their mock drafts because they get click after click after click.
Indeed.
But I just, on the record, I would only do one mock draft a year, and that's because I had to. I hate them.
For when you were doing Pro Football Weekly work?
That and with National Football Post.
Okay.
I just do one. It's like I don't want to be involved in this. That's not real football. Right. I was involved doing the real thing, and the real thing isn't doing mock drafts. But to go back to what I was saying, so you look at packages. So okay, I'm at 2. Let's say your line in the sand is 7. So the farthest you'll go back is 7. So here's what I'm going to get if number 7 or number 6 wants to move up to number 2. This is what I got. I can get this player at number 6 or number 7. I anticipate I can get a guy from this grouping here with that extra pick. So what am I better off with? Taking, let's just say, Will Anderson here or these 2 guys? And what's better for the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
And that's what we did every single day. Jerry and I would go. We'd have all these packages written on the board. Okay, if we trade out, we're going to have this, and we'd have these names: first round, second round, third round, fourth round, and we wouldn't go further than the 4th round. But guys you'd want to get. And if you trade out, you're going to get X amount of picks. So this game, now it's this, and this. You got extra picks and say, okay, are we better with this grouping or with that grouping?
Yeah, good stuff. I want to end with this last question because it's something that I've been thinking about, particularly after, again, reading Brad Bigg's column, the 10 thoughts about the game. He talked about all of the needs this team has. I mean, there's plentiful. You look at offense, defense, even special teams. There are needs, and so Brad talked about if you don't trade that first round pick and acquire more draft capital, it could take another year going to 2024 to complete. I know a rebuild is never complete, and I apologize, Brad. I'm just paraphrasing your words. So the question is, can the Bears get to where they want to in one season, or will it take a second draft and free agency to get where we all want them to get? My guess is it's going to take 2 years. 2024 is when we should expect it.
Let's look at this realistically. With a little luck and throughout yesterday, we know going into, up until yesterday that the couple plays difference, a couple penalty calls, that team very well could have had a winning record. Am I right or wrong?
Right.
Okay. So, but team's basically the same. It's a mediocre team at best right now. Okay. There's just not enough talent. To me, they've got so much money, more than double number 2, that they're going to have an opportunity to get a lot better in a lot of areas. But are they going to do it with 3 splash signings or 8 that they think are really good players that are going to help the team, but it's not going to be that home run signing in the media.
It's a great question.
So can you do it? We have seen in this league over and over again go from the outhouse to the penthouse in 1 year. Frickin' Chicago Bears did it in 2018.
Right. Look at the Rams now.
So, yeah, to me, the Rams are a great example of why you want to hold on to picks. The Rams have screwed themselves. Yeah, they got a Super Bowl win out of it, but they got no future. They got no money and no picks. You know that fuck them picks attitude? Yeah, well, they were like, oh, I wish I could get some. Where can I get some?
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to have to leave it.
I don't know if I agree with Big J on that. I think the answer remains to be seen, and see what happens in free agency, see what happens in the draft. You know, everybody expected Ryan Poles to trade down in the second round. He waited until day 3 to do his trading.
Mm-hmm.
And he picked up a bunch of picks doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And he got some pretty decent players. He's got some guys that are, contributing and helping the team. So could he do the same thing? Yeah, he could. Or could he, trade out to me, if there's a player that you think that you have graded as a potential, Pro Bowl type player, unless you're getting a ransom for that, you can't say no.
By the way, there's a debate in the chat room. I need you to weigh in on this. Sacks versus pressures. You talked about Greg Blash earlier. He was much more focused on trying to create pressures, and that is because pressures create turnovers. You're pressuring the quarterback, he's going to throw inaccurately, and you're going to turn the ball over. Newman Johnson, who's been using caps all throughout the entire show, I don't know why, but he says pressures are nothing but a failed sack, nothing more or less. Is Newman right?
You know what? It's funny because Lovey was the exact opposite. Give me a sack every day of the week. Okay, a great quarterback, an Aaron Rodgers, before he started taking psychedelics, could complete great passes. And did you watch the Notre Dame USC game at all Saturday night?
I saw portions of it. It was too distressing for me.
I mean, that quarterback was like a magician. There was a couple times they had him dead about 10, 12 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And he was like, pulling Justin Fields and got his way out of it and completed passes or ran. Mm-hmm. And so there's a case of pressure's doing absolutely nothing, where a sack is, okay, it's 1st and 10. Now it's 2nd and 16. Well, I'd rather have 2nd and 16.
Sure. I get
it's the same thing as with the dropped interception. Dropped interceptions always come back to haunt you 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And they still have the ball when you drop the interception.
Right. Listen, I'd love to get all of them. I'd love to get hits, hurries, sacks, calling the quarterback names, all of that. I want all that. Whatever it was going to disrupt the other offense's team. But I do think that if you get a consistent pass rush and you're pressuring the quarterback a lot, that's valuable too, because it can lead to turnovers. And
it can, but it doesn't always. And so there are cases you can come up and you can put together a reel of where pressures led to an interception. You could probably find 20 interceptions on that reel, and then and win your argument. But then you could also put together a reel of sacks and see what happened at the end of that drive. Did they punt?
Yeah, I hear you. And with today's defensive schemes, where if you get into a third down and long, you need a lot of luck to pick up that first down because everybody is sending 7 guys back by the line of scrimmage. The Vic Fangio style defense. Anyway, we will leave it there. We've got a lot more to cover as the weeks and months go on. We're going to utilize Greg's insider knowledge and his ability to break down tape to talk about draft prospects. We won't totally ignore what's going on in the football field in the weeks ahead. We've got a big game against the Green Bay Packers. Greg, are you hoping to see Justin Fields play Sunday, or would you rather they mothball him at least for a week?
I think, knowing the competitor that he is, that if he feels he can play, he's going to do everything to play. Now, there was stuff going on during the week that the decision came from above. Bullshit. Okay, and Flus alleviated to it. I don't know if it was yesterday or today. Hey, it was a combination of Ryan, me, the medical staff, and Justin Fields. And they're going to do it if you think the player can get hurt worse than he's already hurt, then you don't play him. Okay, now you can play with a shoulder separation. The problem is pain. Not really going to get any worse, but there is a lot of pain that you got to deal with. And so, that is the problem. And even though it's not his throwing arm, it's the shoulder that's going to take the brunt of the hits as people coming at you. When you're trying to make throws. So I think they're going to play the same game he did last week. He's going to be limited Wednesday and Thursday. If he's full on any of those days, he's playing. If he's limited, I'd say he's not playing.
Well, I'd love to see him play against Green Bay, and then I wouldn't mind if they mothballed him the rest of the season afterwards.
I don't think Rodgers is going to play, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's looking bad for him. I don't think he wants to play. He says he does, but then again, you can't believe anything the man said.
His actions, his mannerisms, his facial expressions say he doesn't want any part of playing.
Exactly.
No, really. And he took himself out last night.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the oblique. On top of that, I read something last week, and I don't know. I meant to look up what an avulsion fracture is. I don't know what that is in your thumb. But it has to be bothering his throwing, how the ball comes out of his hand, being that it is his thumb. But I had read a thing where if they lost to Philadelphia, they were shutting him down the rest of the year. Now, whether that was somebody's hypothetical or that's fact, I'm sure we'll find out before the week's out.
Well, I got to believe that the folks at Green Bay who run that team really want to see Jordan Love out there to see if he is the successor to Aaron Rodgers. And he didn't look too bad yesterday, although when you're playing late in the game there and you're behind, you're going to face some soft defenses. Well, what did you think about Jordan Love and the little bit of action he had yesterday?
Yeah, in all honesty, I saw the touchdown pass to Watson, which was a crossing route, which was more Watson than Jordan Love. I mean, it was a nice pass, but the coverage was poor, and Watson had the speed to turn it up and get the long touchdown out of it. I didn't watch anymore after that.
Can't blame you. All right, that is our show for today.
All the shows to watch on Sunday, so
Yeah, exactly. By the way, what'd you think?
One question: have you watched Tulsa King yet?
No, I have not.
On Paramount Plus?
No, I don't have Paramount Plus. That's why. So I got to figure out how to get that thing.
Pay for it.
I pay for like so many damn streaming channels.
It's really good.
It
Stars Sylvester Stallone, and I'm not a Stallone fan.
Yeah.
And my wife hates him, and she goes, "I'm not going to watch this." I go, oh, "Let's just." And my buddy told me it's really good.
Mhm.
So I said, "Watch one episode." She loves it.
Wow.
Loves it.
And I know you love Yellowstone too, and that's what Cole
It's written
Kmet.
by the same guy. It's all put together by the same guy.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And Cole Kmet recommended to Darnell Mooney that he should watch Yellowstone while he's doing his rehab. So that was great. I thought of you immediately because you've recommended that show as well. All right. Well, one day we're going to do just a movie TV show, Greg. We'll want to get your opinions on all the shows that you love and some of the ones you want us to stay away from. Okay.
That sounds good.
All right, everybody. By the way,
I think we watched everything that was known to mankind the last 10 weeks. So
nice to catch up on stuff, right? Isn't it?
Well, that's all she could do. Now she's back to work. So, and you notice last week I was out in the kitchen. Now I'm back in my office. So,
Are you doing the cooking still?
Oh, I always do the cooking.
There you go.
That doesn't change.
Real men cook. That's what I say. All right, everybody. Make sure you catch Bears Country podcast tonight at 7 p.m. Central. And then we've got a full slate of shows the rest of the week. So best way to stay on top of stuff is to subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Barroom Network. Take care, everybody.
See you later.